Why did a devout mother of three stop praying in the middle of Tahajjud and run screaming from her room? What did the security camera capture that made Islamic scholars across 3 countries demand to see the footage? And why did 7 imams refuse to enter that house after watching what happened during her sujud? This story is so disturbing, so impossible to explain, that it will make you question everything you think you know about what happens when you're alone in prayer. The evidence is real. The footage is unedited. And what it reveals about the unseen world will send chills down your spine. I'm asking you to listen until the very end, because what this woman discovered about who was praying with her will change how you see your own prayer room forever. Her name was Amina, and she thought she was praying alone. She was wrong. Before I continue with Amina's terrifying experience, I need to ask you something important. Please check if you're already subscribed to this channel, and in the comments, write which country you're watching from. I want to know how far this story is reaching and how many people around the world are learning about the unseen realm that surrounds us during our most sacred moments. Your comment helps this content reach more people who need to hear this warning. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Amina Rahman was not the type of woman who believed in ghost stories. At 36 years old, she was a pharmacist, a mother of 3, and someone who approached life with scientific precision. Her faith was strong, yes, but she had always dismissed the supernatural tales her grandmother told back in Pakistan as cultural superstition rather than Islamic truth. Her husband, Khalid, worked night shifts at the hospital 3 times a week. On those nights, Amina would wake for Tahajjud prayer around 3:30 a.m., praying alone in their bedroom while the children slept down the hall. It was her sacred time, a quiet conversation with Allah, when the world was still and silent. She had been doing this for 5 years. Never once had anything unusual happened, until 3 weeks ago. It started small, so small that Amina almost didn't notice. During her second rak'ah of Tahajjud, as she went into sujud, her forehead pressed against the prayer mat, her body in complete submission, she felt something she had never felt before, a warmth behind her, as if someone had walked into the room and was standing there watching. She finished her prayer quickly that night, telling herself it was just her imagination. Khalid was at work. The children were asleep. The doors were locked. She was being paranoid. But the next night, it happened again. And this time it was more than warmth. It was breath. Hot, steady breath on the back of her neck as she prostrated. She could feel it moving the fabric of her hijab, causing the lightest sensation against her skin. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to remain still to finish the prayer properly. Muslims are taught never to break salah for anything less than an emergency. But when she whispered the taslim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, to her right then to her left, she turned around so fast she nearly fell. The room was empty, completely, utterly empty. That's when the fear began to take root. Not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but the slow creeping dread of something you cannot see, cannot explain, cannot escape. Amina didn't tell Khalid. How could she explain it? Honey, I think something is breathing on me during prayer. He would think she was stressed, maybe suggest she see a doctor, and besides, she wasn't even sure it was real. Maybe she had been working too hard at the pharmacy. Maybe it was anxiety manifesting physically. She tried changing her prayer location. Instead of the bedroom, she prayed in the living room, but the sensation followed her. During sujud, always during sujud when she was most vulnerable, most exposed, that breath on her neck, warm, steady, deliberate. On the 5th night, something new happened. As she prostrated reciting, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, glory be to my Lord the Most High, she heard it, a whisper, so faint she almost thought it was the wind. But the windows were closed. The whisper was in Arabic, but distorted somehow, like a recording played backward. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear, mimicry. Whatever was there was trying to copy her prayer. Amina's hands trembled as she finished her salah. This time, she didn't turn around. She was too afraid of what she might see, or what she might not see. The next morning she did something she had never done before. She called her mother-in-law, Nazreen, a woman deeply rooted in traditional Islamic knowledge and the old ways. Ami, Amina's voice shook on the phone. I need to ask you something. Is it possible? Can Jinn pray with us? There was a long silence on the other end. When Nasreen finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. Beta, why are you asking this? Has something happened? Amina told her everything. The breath, the warmth, the whisper during sujud. Another long pause. Then, Amina, listen to me very carefully. Do not pray alone in that house until I come to visit you. And whatever you do, do not acknowledge it. Do not speak to it. Do not turn around when you feel it. But Ami, what is it? I don't know yet. But if it's mimicking your prayer, that's not a good sign. Nasreen couldn't come until the weekend. 3 more days. But Amina couldn't simply stop praying tahajjud. It was her lifeline, her spiritual anchor, and some stubborn part of her refused to let fear drive her away from worship. On the 7th night, she made a decision that would change everything. She set up her phone on the dresser across from her prayer mat, angled so it would record her praying. She told herself it was for proof. If something was really happening, she would have evidence. But deep down, she knew the truth. She needed to see what was behind her during sujood. At 3:30 a.m., with Khalid asleep beside her and the phone recording on night mode, Amina stood for tahajjud. Allahu Akbar, she whispered, raising her hands. The prayer began normally. First rak'ah, second rak'ah. She recited Surah Al-Ikhlas, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. And then came the moment she dreaded most, sujood. She lowered herself to the ground, forehead touching the mat, hands flat on either side of her head, back curved in submission. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. And there it was, the breath. But this time, it was stronger. Not just warmth, but weight, as if someone or something had leaned down close to her exposed neck, so close she could feel the humidity of exhalation against her skin. Her whole body went rigid with terror, but she forced herself to continue. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Then she heard it again, the whisper. But this time it wasn't faint. It was clear, right next to her ear. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. The exact words she had just spoken. In a voice that was not quite male, not quite female, something in between, something wrong. Amina's blood turned to ice. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to break the prayer, to get out of that room. But she was frozen, not by fear alone, but by the weight of whatever was pressing close behind her. She finished the sujood and sat up, her heart slamming so hard she thought it would burst. She rushed through the rest of the prayer, barely coherent, and when she finally whispered the taslim, she didn't turn around. She stood up, grabbed her phone from the dresser without looking at the screen, and walked calmly out of the room. Only when she reached the bathroom and locked the door did she let herself shake. For a long moment, Amina just stared at the phone screen, unable to press play. What if there was nothing there? What if she had imagined everything, or worse, what if there was something there? She pressed play. The video showed her room in the grainy green of night vision. There she was, standing in prayer, small and alone in the frame. The footage was clear enough. She could see herself raising her hands for takbir, bowing for ruku, lowering herself into sujood. Amina fast-forwarded to the moment she dreaded. 3:42 a.m. The timestamp when she went into the second sujood, when she felt the breath, when she heard the whisper. She watched herself lower into prostration, and then she saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow, a distortion in the video, maybe a glitch, but as she watched, her mouth went dry. Behind her prostrated form, the air seemed to shimmer, not like heat waves, but like density, like something was occupying space where nothing should be. The shimmer had a vague shape to it, tall, hovering just behind her lowered body. Amina paused the video, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She zoomed in on the shimmer, and that's when she saw something that made her stomach turn. The shimmer had a shadow, a faint shadow cast on the wall by her bedside lamp, a shadow that shouldn't exist if nothing was there. The shadow was curved forward, as if something tall was leaning down toward her prostrated form, exactly the way she had felt the breath on her neck. Amina watched the rest of the video in horrified silence. The shimmer remained there throughout her entire sujood. When she sat up, it seemed to pull back slightly, but didn't disappear. It stayed there, hovering until she stood and left the room. Then, in the final seconds of the video, just before she reached the door, the shimmer moved. It turned toward the camera, as if it knew it was being recorded. And for just one frame, maybe two, Amina saw what looked like eyes. 2 points of darker shadow within the shimmer, fixed directly on the phone screen, fixed on her. She dropped the phone, pressed her hand to her mouth, and tried not to scream. She couldn't wake the children. She couldn't panic. But every fiber of her being wanted to grab her family and run from that house and never look back. Instead, she picked up the phone with shaking hands and did the only thing she could think of. She sent the video to Nasreen with a single message. "Ami, please watch this. Tell me I'm not going insane." Nasreen called back within an hour. Her voice was tight, controlled, the voice she used when something was seriously wrong. Amina, I watched it 3 times. I showed it to Maulana Tariq from the mosque. We both saw it. What is it, Ami? What's in my house? We believe it's a jinn, a qareen, possibly, a companion spirit. But this behavior is unusual. Unusual how? Most qarins simply observe. They don't interact so directly, and they certainly don't mimic prayer. That's what concerns us most. Khalid looked up from his tablet, noticing Amina's pale face for the first time. What's wrong? Who are you talking to? Amina covered the phone's microphone. Just your mother. She's coming this weekend, remember? He shrugged and returned to his tablet, oblivious to the terror that had taken root in his own home. Nasreen continued, her voice low and urgent. There's something else, Beta. Maulana Tariq said that when jinns start mimicking prayer, it usually means one of 2 things. Either they're genuinely trying to worship, which would mean this is a Muslim jinn, and relatively harmless, or what? Or they're mocking. And if they're mocking your worship, it means they have bad intentions. It means they're testing boundaries, seeing how far they can push before you break. Amina felt tears prick her eyes. What do I do until you get here? Continue your prayers, but not alone. Pray next to Khalid, even if you have to wake him. Keep reciting Ayatul Kursi before you sleep. And Amina, Nasreen's voice dropped even lower, if it speaks to you again, do not answer it. No matter what it says, do not engage. That night, Amina woke Khalid for tahajjud. He was confused, groggy, but agreed to pray with her. As they stood side by side in the bedroom, Amina felt a flood of relief. Surely nothing would approach with Khalid there. They prayed together, and for the first time in a week, Amina felt nothing during sujood. No breath, no warmth, no whisper. She nearly wept with gratitude, but as they finished the prayer and Khalid shuffled back to bed, already half asleep, Amina glanced at the corner of the room, the corner where the shimmer had hovered in the video, and she saw, just for a second, a subtle distortion in the air, watching, waiting. It hadn't left. It had simply learned to hide when others were present. Maulana Tariq listened to everything Amina had to say. He watched the video twice, stroking his beard thoughtfully. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Sister Amina, he finally said, how long have you lived in this house? 4 years. We bought it when I was pregnant with our youngest. And did you perform any Islamic cleansing when you moved in? Recite Quran in every room? Establish the house as a place of dhikr? Amina felt her cheeks burn with shame. No, Maulana, we just moved in, painted, decorated. We didn't think. He nodded without judgment. Most people don't. And in England especially, many houses have histories we know nothing about. Sometimes those histories leave residents. You're saying this jinn was here before us? Possibly. Or it was attracted here by something. Jinn are drawn to certain things, neglected spaces, places where Allah's name is rarely mentioned, homes where music and television dominate over Quran. Amina thought of their living room, the large TV always on, the music her children played, the way they had let worldly entertainment fill every silence instead of remembrance of Allah. But why is it mimicking my prayer? She asked. Why during sujood specifically? Maulana Tariq's expression grew grave. Sujood is the position of ultimate submission. When we prostrate, we are at our most vulnerable physically, and spiritually, we are closest to Allah. It's the moment when the barriers between the seen and unseen worlds grow thin. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If a jinn is mimicking your prayer during sujood, especially in that mocking tone you described, it's not trying to worship. It's trying to distract you, to make you so afraid that you abandon your night prayers. Why would it want that? Because tahajjud is powerful, sister. It's the prayer the Prophet Muhammad never missed. It's when Allah descends to the lowest heaven and asks, who is calling upon me that I may answer them? The shayateen, the devils among jinn, they hate tahajjud. They will do anything to prevent it. Nasreen spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. Maulana, what do we do? How do we protect her? First, we recite Quran throughout the entire house. We fill every room with Ayatul Kursi, with Surah Al-Baqarah. We remind this entity that this is a Muslim household under Allah's protection. And if it doesn't leave, Maulana Tariq's eyes were steady, but there was something else in them, something that looked almost like pity. Then we will see what it truly wants. The Quranic recitation had taken 3 hours. Maulana Tariq walked through every room, reciting Surah Al-Baqarah in its entirety. Amina followed, watching as he touched door frames, window sills, corners, every entry point, and whispered protective verses. The house felt different afterward, lighter somehow, as if something heavy had been pressed down on it and was now lifting. But when they reached the bedroom, her bedroom, where she prayed tahajjud, the air grew thick again. Maulana Tariq paused at the threshold, his recitation faltering for just a moment. "It's concentrated here," he murmured. "Whatever it is, this room is its anchor point." Now, at 3 a.m., they sat in that room, waiting. Amina had wanted to cancel, to call Khalid and the children home, to pretend none of this was happening. But Maulana Tariq insisted. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," he said. "And the only way to do that is to invite it to reveal itself. You want it to come? Sister Amina, it's already here, it never left. We're simply asking it to stop hiding." At 3:30 a.m., Amina stood for tahajjud. Maulana Tariq sat behind her, just out of frame of the recording device, reciting protective verses under his breath. She began to pray. The words felt heavy on her tongue, as if she were speaking through molasses. The air in the room was oppressively warm, despite the cool autumn night outside. When she lowered herself into the first sujud, it was there immediately, the breath. But this time it wasn't just warm, it was hot, like standing too close to a furnace. She could feel it moving across the back of her neck, deliberate and slow. "Subhana Rabbiyal A'la," she whispered, her voice trembling, and then she heard it. Not a whisper this time, but a clear voice. Still distorted, still wrong, but unmistakably words. "Why do you worship what you cannot see?" Amina's blood froze. It had spoken to her directly, asked her a question. Maulana Tariq's recitation grew louder behind her, more insistent. But the voice spoke again, closer now. "You prostrate to nothing. You pray to emptiness. He does not hear you." Every muscle in Amina's body screamed at her to run, to break the prayer, to get away. But she remembered Nasreen's warning. Do not engage. Do not answer. She forced herself to continue. "Subhana Rabbi al-Ala, Subhana Rabbi al-Ala." "I hear you," the voice hissed, and now it sounded almost amused. "I am here with you. I breathe when you breathe. I bow when you bow. Where is your God?" Tears streamed down Amina's face, but she didn't break. She finished the sujud and sat up, and even though every instinct told her not to, she went into the second sujud. The voice laughed, a sound like dry leaves scraping against glass. "You are stronger than I thought, but you will break. They all break eventually." Maulana Tariq stood suddenly, his voice rising above the entity's whispers. "Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Kul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad." The temperature in the room plummeted. Amina felt the presence behind her recoil, as if struck. "Leave this house," Maulana Tariq commanded. "You have no claim here. This is a home of believers, protected by Allah, and you will not—" His words cut off abruptly. Amina, still in sujud, heard a thud. She broke her prayer instantly and turned. Maulana Tariq was on his knees, his face pale, one hand pressed to his chest. "Maulana, don't stop," he gasped. "Finish your prayer." But before she could move, before she could decide what to do, the lights went out. "Maulana, Maulana, are you okay?" "I'm here." His voice was weak but steady. "The circuit breaker. It wants darkness." Amina's hands fumbled in the dark, finding her phone. She activated the flashlight, and the beam cut through the blackness of the room. Maulana Tariq was still on his knees, but he was upright, breathing hard. And behind him, Amina's scream died in her throat. The shimmer from the video wasn't a shimmer anymore. In the beam of her flashlight, she could see it clearly. A shape, tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that were too long and bent at wrong angles. Its face, if it could be called that, was a shifting mass of shadow, but those eyes, those 2 points of darker black, were fixed on her. It stood between her and the bedroom door. "You wanted to see me," it said, and the voice was no longer distorted. It was clear, resonant, terrible. "Now you see me. Does it bring you comfort? Does it strengthen your faith?" Maulana Tariq struggled to his feet, positioning himself between Amina and the jinn. "In the name of Allah, I command you to reveal your purpose. Why do you torment this woman?" The jinn tilted its head, the movement sharp and bird-like. "Torment? I merely observe. I watch her prostrate herself night after night, humbling herself before a God who does not answer. It fascinates me." "Allah always answers," Maulana Tariq said firmly, "even when the answer is silence. Even when the answer is patience, he answers. Does he? The jinn took a step closer, and the temperature dropped further. Then why does she pray alone? Why does her husband sleep while she kneels in the dark? Why does she carry her burdens without help? Amina felt the words strike something deep inside her. It was true. She had been lonely in her faith, had felt isolated in her attempts to maintain tahajjud while everyone else slept. But she pushed the thought away. That's what you do, she whispered, finding her voice. That's what shayateen do. You whisper doubts. You exploit loneliness. You make us question what we know to be true. The jinn's attention snapped to her, and for the first time she met its gaze directly. You want me to stop praying, she continued, her voice growing stronger. You want me to abandon tahajjud, to give up the one time I feel closest to Allah. Because if I stop, if you win, then you've stolen something precious from me. And what if I have already stolen it? The jinn hissed. What if your prayers are tainted now? What if every time you prostrate you will feel my breath, hear my voice, remember my presence? What if I have made your sacred space into a place of fear? Amina felt tears stream down her face, but she didn't look away. Then I will pray afraid. I will pray with trembling hands and a pounding heart. But I will not stop. You do not have that power over me. For a long moment, the jinn said nothing. The room was utterly silent except for their breathing, human and something not quite human. Then Maulana Tariq spoke, his voice filled with a strength that seemed to come from somewhere beyond himself. I name you for what you are, Shaitan, enemy of mankind, reject of Allah's mercy. By the authority of Surah Al-Jinn, by the words revealed to Prophet Muhammad, by the protection Allah grants to those who seek refuge in Him, I command you to depart from this place and never return. He raised his right hand, and in a voice that shook the walls recited, Kul a'udhu bi rabbil falak min sharri ma khalaq. The jinn screamed. It wasn't a human scream, it was the sound of wind tearing through stone, of metal scraping metal. The shape began to distort, to break apart, shadows scattering like smoke in a gale. Wa min sharri ghasikin idha waqab. The recording device exploded, sparks flying. The windows rattled in their frames. Wa min sharri an-nafathati fil uqad. The jinn lunged forward, and for one terrible moment, Amina thought it would reach her. But Maulana Tariq stepped fully in front of her, completing the surah, Wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. The lights slammed back on. The temperature returned to normal. The oppressive weight that had filled the room vanished as if it had never existed. The jinn was gone. But in the sudden silence, Amina heard something that made her heart stop, crying, coming from upstairs, from the children's room, the children who weren't supposed to be home. Amina threw open the closet door. Her youngest daughter, Safia, 5 years old, was huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face. Safia, sweetheart, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at your aunt's house. I saw him, Mama, Safia sobbed. I saw the tall man. He was in your room. Amina's blood turned to ice. What? When did you see him? Lots of times. He comes when you pray. But tonight he was angry. His face was scary. Amina pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, her mind reeling. How long had Safia been seeing it? How much had this child witnessed while Amina thought she was protecting her by keeping silent? Maulana Tariq knelt beside them, his face grave. Safia, did the tall man ever talk to you? The little girl nodded, still crying. He said Mama was going to stop praying soon. He said she would give up, but I told him no. My Mama is strong. She never gives up. Tears streamed down Amina's face as she held her daughter. You're right, sweetheart. Mama didn't give up. And the tall man is gone now, he can't come back. But even as she spoke the words, Maulana Tariq's expression made her doubt. He stood slowly, gesturing for Amina to follow him out of the room. In the hallway he spoke in a low voice. The jinn is banished from this house, yes, but Sister Amina, you need to understand something important. It was attracted here for a reason. These entities don't just appear randomly. They're drawn to weakness, to cracks in spiritual protection. What kind of cracks? You said you and Khalid didn't establish this as a Muslim home when you moved in. No Quran recitation, no regular dhikr. And tell me honestly, before this started, how often was Allah's name mentioned in this house compared to music, television, worldly conversations? Amina felt shame wash over her. Not enough, not nearly enough. That's the crack. And until you fill it with light, with constant remembrance of Allah, with regular Quran recitation, with making this house a fortress of faith, you will remain vulnerable, not necessarily to the same jinn, but to others. Over the next few days, Amina and Khalid, who finally learned the full truth, transformed their home. The television stayed off except for news. Music was replaced with Quranic recitation. Every morning and evening, they recited Ayatul Kursi together as a family. Before bed, they recited the last 3 surahs of the Quran. Khalid took it hard at first, the guilt of not believing his wife, of sleeping through her terror, of letting his family become vulnerable. But he channeled that guilt into action. He began waking for Tahajjud with Amina, praying side by side. The house felt different, lighter, peaceful. But 3 weeks after the confrontation, something arrived in the mail that shook Amina to her core. It was a USB drive in a plain envelope, no return address, and inside was a note in elegant Arabic script. The recording from that night. You deserve to see what we all saw. Are you sure you want to see this? Khalid asked, his hand covering Amina's. She nodded. I need to know. I need to understand what we were really facing. They pressed play. The audio began with Maulana Tariq's recitation of protective verses. Then came Amina's voice, beginning her prayer. The video showed exactly what Amina remembered. The 2 of them in the room, her praying, him watching vigilantly. But then, at 3:38 a.m., the audio device picked up something the human ear couldn't fully process in the moment. A low-frequency sound, almost subsonic, that made the speakers crackle. And beneath that sound were voices. Not one voice, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all whispering variations of the same phrase, "She will break, she will break, she will break." When the jinn appeared on screen, that tall, impossible shape, the audio recorder captured something that made all 3 of them gasp. Behind the primary entity, barely visible, were others. Dozens of shadow shapes hovering in the corners of the room, in the doorway pressed against the ceiling. It hadn't been one jinn. It had been a congregation of them, and they had all been watching. Ya Allah, Nasreen whispered. They were testing her, testing whether she would break. The recording continued. When Amina declared that she would pray despite her fear, that the jinn didn't have power over her, something remarkable happened on screen. The shadow shapes in the background began to withdraw, one by one, as if her words had cut through whatever held them there. And when Maulana Tariq recited Surah Al-Falaq, the primary jinn didn't just vanish, it was violently expelled, torn out of the room by an unseen force that left a ripple in the very air, visible even on the recording. The video ended with the room empty, silent, and somehow brighter despite the unchanged lighting. Amina sat back, tears streaming down her face. All this time, I thought I was weak for being afraid. But the fear didn't matter. The faith mattered. 6 months have passed since that night. Amina still prays Tahajjud, though now she's never truly alone. Khalid wakes with her more nights than not, and when he can't, their oldest son has begun joining her. The house has become what it should have been from the beginning, a fortress of faith. Not because evil can't approach a Muslim home, but because a Muslim home filled with dhikr, Quran, and sincere worship is protected by Allah Himself. Amina never felt the breath again, never heard the whisper. The shimmer never returned to their recording devices, though she occasionally sets up her phone, not out of fear, but as a reminder of what she survived. The story spread through their community. Maulana Tariq used it as a teaching example of why establishing a home as a place of worship matters, why Tahajjud is called the prayer of the righteous, why we should never underestimate the reality of the unseen world. But the most profound change was in Amina herself. She had always been a believer, yes, but now she was a warrior. She understood that faith isn't the absence of fear. Faith is praying while your hands shake. Faith is prostrating when you feel breath on your neck. Faith is declaring Allahu Akbar when everything in you wants to run. And she learned something else, something that would shape the rest of her spiritual life. We are never truly praying alone. Not because jinn are watching, though they may be, but because Allah is always closer to us than our jugular vein, especially in sujud, especially in tahajjud, especially when we feel most vulnerable and afraid. The entities of darkness know this. That's why they attack at those moments, because they know that a Muslim who continues to pray despite fear, despite attack, despite whispers of doubt, that Muslim becomes unbreakable. So what can you learn from Amina's story? First, never underestimate the importance of making your home a fortress of faith. Recite Quran regularly, especially Surah Al-Baqarah. Say Ayatul Kursi before sleeping. Fill your house with dhikr, not just entertainment. These aren't superstitions. They're spiritual protections that matter. Second, The unseen world is real. Jinn exist. They're not metaphors or myths. The Quran confirms their existence in multiple surahs. And while most jinn leave humans alone, some, the shayateen, actively work to lead us astray. Your strongest defense is your prayer, especially tahajjud. Third, if you ever experience something you cannot explain, if you feel watched during prayer, if you hear whispers in the night, if your home feels oppressed, don't panic but don't ignore it. Seek help from knowledgeable Muslims. Increase your Quran recitation. Never abandon your prayer out of fear, because that's exactly what the shayateen want. And finally, fear doesn't negate faith. Amina was terrified, but she didn't let terror stop her from worshipping Allah. That's the definition of courage, not the absence of fear but action despite fear. If this story has affected you, if it's made you think differently about your own spiritual protection, I want you to do something for me. Share this video with your family and friends. Not to frighten them, but to educate them. We live in a world that's forgotten the reality of the unseen. We need to remember. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about faith, the supernatural, and the thin veil between our world and theirs. And leave a comment answering this question. Have you ever experienced something in your home that you couldn't explain? Something that made you question the reality of the unseen world? Your story might help someone else who's going through what Amina went through. Feeling alone, feeling afraid, wondering if they're losing their mind, you're not alone. The unseen world is real, but so is Allah's protection. And that protection is stronger than any jinn, any shaitan, any force of darkness that exists. Keep praying, keep believing, keep protecting your homes with dhikr and Quran. And remember, when you prostrate in sujood, you are in the most protected position you can ever be in, because you are closest to Allah. That's why they hate it so much. That's why you should never stop. May Allah protect you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.